All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dungan-Mott Music Movie Podcast. I'm Devin Dunnigan, and here with me, as always, is Mr. Stephen Mott. How you doing, brother?
Great brother Jake C. Drummer, fricadang crap.
All righty, so today we are back, and we have another kind of themed episode, if you will, which is kind of a continuation of what we've been doing with the Ultimate Classic Rock rankings and our best of and worst of different bands and stuff like that. But today we're going to be tackling our personal favorite guitar players. So our top 5 guitar players. So each of us have a top 5 list, and I think we both have some honorable mentions, which is another 5, because originally I had written a top 10 list, but I dwindled it down to 5, and well, it was kind of more Steven's idea to do that, because originally I said top 10, but whatever. So yeah, we're going to just basically go through our lists of each guitar player on here and talk about what we enjoy most about them and how we discovered them and what their discography and what their playing means to us most of all. So I'm going to let Steven take the first one here. So his number 5. So Steven, go right on ahead.
So let's see. Now my number 5. This is going to be triggering to Devin very much so. And rightfully so. Are you ready? Gary Rich Rath. So yes, very, very triggering, and REO Speedwagon. So this would not be on anywhere near probably most people's top 5 of anything. But I mean, I just personally, I just wanted to trigger people with this one, and that's it. I mean, I think his playing is very unique. It fits the band. It makes the music stand out that much more. And I just don't know. So I'm sure Devin will, very much, be non-accustomed to, picking off the wall crap like I do. But that's okay because, no, no, no. So bye.
All righty. So yeah, that's an interesting choice. And I like Gary Rich Rath's playing a lot. I think he's a very, very solid guitar player. And I hear a lot of his influence in Molly Hatchet's current band leader, Bobby Ingram. And a lot of his playing, it definitely seems like he was probably influenced by him. But yeah, great guitar player in my opinion. I love REO Speedwagon, especially the older stuff. But there's some great newer stuff too with them, which they haven't made an album in many, many years. But like from the early 90s up until I think the last album they did was in 2007 or something like that. And I think it may have been actually a Christmas album or whatever. But my number 5 is probably a controversial choice for it to be in the spot that it's in, but Eric Clapton. So this had to be on my list for many, many reasons. Like Kiss, he was definitely a gateway into a lot of other music. And there's another guitar player on here that was also a major gateway into other kinds of music. And I don't know if I've ever really told the story before on the podcast, but he was an artist that I got into kind of all at once and started listening to all different parts of his catalog. And I just think he is a great guitar player. I think that he does tend to hold himself back a lot of times with his playing. I think he is a much more technical guitar player than he actually tries to be nowadays. It kind of seems like more or less he simplified his style and kind of settled into this more kind of veteran blues guitarist kind of style, and he can do so much more. And I mean, you look back to those early 90s tours, like he could shred pretty much. But yeah, Really good guitar player. I mean, he's a large influence on many people. I think he's still a great guitar player now. I just think it's in the way that he asserts himself. And yeah, that is my number 5. So, Stephen, what is your number 4?
Yes. No. So number 4, very interesting, but Devin will definitely agree. So here we go. You ready? Blackmore. Yes. So um so Blackmore of the band Black. So that's it. I'm just playing so yeah. Purple Deep. That's the band. So I mean pretty much he's a very bluesy player. And that's why I tend to favor bluesy players. So I mean he's rock, but he's very bluesy in his style. So pro bono points. Um, and yeah, Blackmore and Devin will agree. Thank you. Next, bye. Crap.
All righty. So, yeah, great guitar player, underrated. I mean, he's known for simply Smoke on the Water, but he has done so much more. I mean, even into doing his Rainbow tenures that he did throughout his career. I mean, the first from like the mid '70s up until the mid '80s, and then when he reformed in the mid '90s, and then he's reformed here more recently. And I just think all of those eras of Rainbow were such great bands altogether. And they were all different bands because Blackmore kept firing everybody, which is the most interesting thing. And I know it's commonly known that he was not a very happy guy to be around. Overall, great guitar player, and he needs to be more well known. I mean, to die-hard music fans, he is, but to the general guitar player or the general music fan, he has a whole lot more than just Smoke on the Water. That's for sure. So my number 4, another controversial one probably, and especially in the place it's at, but Stevie Ray Vaughan. So this is another artist that really cemented my love of music overall and my love of like blues and stuff like that. I've always been a fan of really bluesy music, and that's pretty much what he was to a T. So, I mean, I kind of discovered him. I kind of always known about him ever since I was little, and I remember my parents listening to him a lot. And I went back and kind of discovered the back catalog of him from like the first album, Texas Flood, and all these various compilations that they did after his death and all. And definitely gone way too soon, but his music lives on. Great player live. And it's just interesting to think about where he could have went if he would have survived and went on with his career. Could he have gotten heavier? Could he have become a more heavier guitar player? Or would he have just stuck to the blues and stuff like that? Because he was very Hendrix influenced as well, and that came out in a lot of his playing. But yeah, that's my number 4, Stevie Ray Vaughan. So, Stephen, what is your number 3?
My mic was still unmuting. Yes. Yes. That's it. I'm playing. Yes, that's it. Number 3. Yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, I agree with the placement because mine is the same placement. So that was kind of a fail. No play. For argument's sake. But we need to have like a debate at the end of this where we cuss each other out about this. Because I can see where yours is going or where I think it's going, and mine is already kind of went there. But well, except for one particular player. that if you didn't include in a top 5 list, that you would probably be Murder on the Spot. Murder in High Heels, in other words. So yeah. But yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Not a whole lot to say. Probably one of the best blues players, so, of our modern era. So, thanks. Bye.
All righty, so my number 3 is going to be Ace Frehley. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say. So, yeah, Ace Frehley, a very influential guitarist to many, many people. His riffs and solos on those old Kiss songs, just such classic stuff. I mean, so classic that Tommy Thayer goes out every night and plays those classic solos pretty much to a T. And I'm not saying that as a kind of a tear down of Tommy Thayer or anything like that, but definitely a great guitar player overall. I've always loved Kiss since I was very little. It's a band I don't think I ever really discovered. It was just kind of there, and I've always known about them. And they are my favorite band of all time. We'll be honest, kind of burn out on them here and there, especially with all of the crazy, controversial bull crap and just the drama that goes on nowadays. I could just care less. It's the music to me that means the most. But yeah, that is my number 3, Ace Frehley. Great guitar player, great solo artist. He's had some great solo albums over the years. I mean, the 2 Frehley's Comet albums and the EP that they did, Live Plus One, those were great albums. Trouble Walking, Anomaly, not so much. Spaceman and Space Invader were good. And then the Origins albums, I really don't remember much about. But I mean, the best Kiss solo album because of the 4 78 solo albums. I mean, it did the best. It had the big hit off of it. And yeah, just such a great record. And so, yeah, that is my number 3, Ace Frehley. So what is your number 2, Stephen?
Number 2. Now, the fact that this is number 2 is going to trigger you. I'm just playing. Let's see. His initials are HVE, backwards. So yeah, this very uncommonly known individual. He's known as the Red Warrior, the Fat Mole, and the Cat Coal. So yeah, Eddie Van Halen. So thank you. Bye. I'm just playing. So yeah, as you can imagine, Devin, if you can use your imagination of who I have for number 1, yeah, so that's going to trigger some people. Process of due elimination. So yeah, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen. So the Striped Warrior. Bye.
All righty. So my number 2 is going to be Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. Such a great guitar player. I mean, it's repeating once again like I usually do on all these episodes, but I mean, another guitar player that I don't really think has got his due over the years. I mean, everybody knows the big Sabbath hits, but there's deeper songs in that catalog, and especially when you get into the Dio era and the Tony Martin era, and then the brief Gillan era, and then Glenn Hughes's kind of footnote in the band with Seventh Star, and then the Heaven and Hell group that was basically Black Sabbath with Dio, but they had to change the name because of legal reasons. Just an amazing, unique guitar player. I mean, it's widely known. Like, I mean, he had the tips of his fingers basically cut off, and then he replaced them with, I think it was like rubber or something like that. And that's how he played guitar, which is such, I mean, back then, guitar players just they a lot of them took chances with stuff, and they were creative on how they could play. I mean, you also had like musicians like Jeff Healey, who was blind but played the guitar. I mean, almost like a virtuoso. And then you had all these other musicians that had all these disabilities. I mean, even like Jason Becker, who is basically just there. I mean, composes music with his eyes. I mean, artists that are just creative and kept their passion going, even though something happened that could have basically stricken them from playing guitar or whatever. And I mean, he's a prime example of it. And I mean, maybe I went off a little bit too far with my examples, but just a good guitar player. Love Sabbath. I love the Dio Sabbath. I love all eras of Sabbath, really. So yeah, that's my number two. So Stephen, what is your number one?
So yeah, so that only leaves one more for me. So yeah, Eric Clapton by Thank You Next. I'm just playing. So yeah, I mean basically for me, there really isn't. I mean honestly, I still go back to a lot of his stuff, especially Cream here lately. But like the older stuff. But I feel like he's just like the Mac Daddy of all of them. Because like, if you ask, let's just say, for example, anybody like Eddie Van Halen, even like I've read parts in his book where he has influences from him. Like, I mean, you can name anybody just about. I mean, with the exception of a few, like I mean, a lot of these most popular players from later on, like obviously Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, I mean, the most popular people, like like that. Another one, like Leonard Skinner. In fact, they covered Crossroads in their live album. But um, you know, it's just the influence is just you know undeniable. I mean, like Eddie Van Halen had a lot of influence, but I mean, I guess that would make sense to somebody to say that Eddie Van Halen had more, but I feel like I don't know if that's true. To tell you the truth, so that's gonna blow some heads. So, bye.
So my number one, of course, is Eddie Van Halen, and I mean, what more can I say that Steven hasn't already said? He is, to most people, the greatest of all time, the guy who took the electric guitar and basically pretty much upgraded it for the next 1,000 years. I mean, he had everyone in the mid 80s and or the early 80s to mid 80s, late 80s, whatever you want to call it, the hair metal era, whatever, Sunset Strip era. He basically had everyone wanting to be him. All these bands were forming with the four members, with the flashy guitar player, the very pretty boy singer that could really hit the high notes, so that you had the kind of in the middle bassist that could sing really good backing vocals, and then the great drummer. And Eddie Van Halen, he just took so many things and just went full force. And I like all the Van Halen albums, even Van Halen 3. I know everybody hates that record. There's some stuff on the For an Awful Carnal Knowledge record that I'm not the biggest fan of, but even then, it's more lyrically than actually musically. But yeah, the greatest guitar player of all time to me. Very, very missed. I remember when he passed away, it was such a shock, and I was very, very sad. And that kind of is hard for me to get like that. But I was very, very, very depressed when he passed away. But yeah, that's it. That's our top five guitar players of all time. So now we're going to move into our honorable mentions, or another kind of the bottom five, I guess is what you'd call this. So, Stephen, what is your number 5 here.
The thing is like my mic was muted, so I'm Pete. But I mean, I just kind of came up with 4 because I thought I had 10, but I really had more like 8 total, or 8 or 9, I can't remember. But one of them I would like to mention first of all. It's what I was talking about earlier before we recorded. A guy named Brent Mason. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people probably don't know who he is, but or if Devin doesn't. But he's just a session guitar player, and he's mostly country, but he does jazz and stuff too. But he shreds. um, look up Brent Mason Hot Wired, and yeah, you'll see what I mean. But I just really think that he and okay. By the way, I forgot. I almost forgot to mention this. Alan Jackson. He's Alan Jackson's guitar player. All those hits by Alan Jackson, people don't realize it, but that's all the same guy, and he makes all those songs like that much better to the next level. You know, all that all that stuff like Chattahoochee, like I mean, Gone Country, every bit of that stuff is all him, stuff that he came up with, and you know what I'm saying? Like if you go through, a lot of people don't realize, oh, that's just Alan Jackson. No, that's the same guitar player, like that's Brett Mason, and that's behind this music too, you know, and like Alan just kind of stuck with him, and it's just kind of not, it's outside the rock realm, majorly. But that's just one that I definitely wanted to throw in there that stuck out to me. So, yeah, no, back to you.
All right, and yeah, I've actually heard of him before. I don't know much about him. I do know he was a session musician, but yeah, that's pretty much to the extent that I know of him. So number 5 for me. So I do have 5 more here. Like I said originally, I had written the top 10, but number 5 for me, I'm going with Gary Moore. So the rock blues guitarist or metal blues guitarist, whatever you want to call him, a shredder for sure. I mean, those '80s albums he did, like Corridors of Power and Victims of the Future, stuff like that. What was the other one? Run for Cover. It came out in the mid '80s with Glenn Hughes. I think it was Run for Cover was the name of it. I mean, shredding all over it. And he was in, of course, originally in Thin Lizzy and all. And a guitar player that I just think is such an amazing, another kind of unsung hero on the guitar. A lot of the diehards know him. And yeah, he's just, to me, a really, really great guitar player. I love a lot of that blues stuff. I've heard him, like Still Got the Blues is such a great song. And the stuff I've heard him do on his solo albums are good. To be honest, Thin Lizzy is a band I've never really dove into before, but something I definitely need to check more out of. But yeah, that's my number 5. Steven, what is your number 4 or 3 or whatever it was? So
4, 3, 2, 1, go. So, yeah. No. So, this is gonna be another one that's like gonna be like, okay. Guy named Brad Paisley. Yeah, so country star, but singer, but he just so happens to also be a master guitar player, by the way. So, so yeah, he's one of the few country singers in the modern era, or of any era, to be quite honest with you, that plays guitar to his level. I mean, and he's a country singer, and he plays these, you know, like he comes up with these great riffs and solos and stuff, and like he's a serious like shredder player, and I mean, it's just like it's another thing. Like a lot of people don't think, they just don't realize that it's him, because a lot of country players, or most country players, you know, or country singers, I should say, they have just session players that come in, blah blah blah. You know, they just sing. but Brad, he does everything. I mean, he does like it's just kind of a rare thing to me to have that combination, especially in country. So, but anyway, I mean, that's just the point I wanted to make also. And there's a few others, but the other two are blues players, I think. Well, one of them's not. I've got a couple more after this. So bye.
All righty. So my number three, or my number four actually, I'm going with Angus Young of AC/DC. He's always been one of my favorite guitar players. I've always enjoyed his playing style, and I mean, AC/DC is a band that never changed throughout their entire career. Even the albums that they kind of went commercial on, they were still AC/DC sounding. And his playing has always been just this interesting style, kind of almost in like a distorted out Chuck Berry kind of style, like a classic rock and roll style, but kind of just heavier. And I just think he is a great guitar player. And I just kind of want to add also his brother Malcolm Young, who came up with a lot of the riffs for AC/DC. I mean, just as much a part of that sound as he was. And I mean, both of those guys, great guitar players, very, very influential guitar players, in my opinion. So, what is your next one, Steven?
So my next one is going to be no surprise to Devin, but Ed King. So yeah, I've talked about him a lot before, but I just love his style, and I mean, he has like a sort of a bluesy style. When he plays slide, it sounds bluesy, and I just love that sound. And so yeah, Ed King. I think honestly, I think he is like top tier. I think if he would have kept going with Skinnerd, I think he would have just kept, making more great music. Simple as that. And but really, I mean, after he got out of Skinner, like I guess he didn't really do anything of significance besides Skinner, because he rejoined Skinner, and other than that, I really don't know what else he did. I feel like he could have and should have done something more stuff like with other bands, or you know what I'm saying, like, or become a session musician or something, because he's like a top tier player, and it's like that's all he ever did that I know of. I mean, I could obviously be wrong, and I hope I am, but I mean, I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but like outside of Skinner, I mean, I don't know what else he did. Well, okay, so he was in a band before that, a couple bands or something. Um, but it wasn't. He wasn't. His guitar playing wasn't highlighted in those bands. So I guess it doesn't apply to what I'm really talking about. So bye.
So, my next pick here is going to be Lil Wayne. So, so yeah, my next pick, in all seriousness, is another Skinner alumni, and that's Alan Collins. I've always thought he was a great guitar player as well. All the guitar players in Skinner, and for the most part, every guitar player that they've ever had has been amazing. And I think that was the one thing Skinner could really, really do was, I mean, bring in some great guitar players. Even the ones they have now. I mean, Damon Johnson, of course, is a great guitar player. You got Ricky Medlock, who's amazing, and then the guy Mark Sparky Matichek, or whatever his freaking name is. He's got a weird, wonky last name, but he's a pretty good guitar player. But yeah, overall, Alan Collins to me is the real deal. It took him, Gary Rossington, and then Ed King, and then Steve Gaines. I mean, all three of those guys together were amazing. And then Even when they was just the two guitar players in the mid '70s. I mean, great stuff there. So that is my number 3. So what is your next one, Steven?
Well, this is when I'm gonna go into blues shit. So BB King. I just didn't think I wanted to make a list video without mention of him. So yeah, here you go. So Eduardo King, BB King, Freddie King, all the Kings. But yeah, BB King is one of the best blues players. So he had a slow blues style, but it was like one that was kind of just nobody can quite replicate because of his vibrato. And that's probably his best quality. And yeah, his vibrato is just the best probably out of any player I've ever heard. So he just uses certain like phrases and stuff over and over, but in such a context that it's just like it's just he's been doing it for so long that he knows where to go with it. If it makes any sense, he did it for so many years. I know that sounds dumb to say, but like if you listen to him for a long time, you'll understand what I mean. Like he has these certain things he does, but he just does it in different ways in different songs or something. But yeah, so bye.
All right, so my number 2 here is going to be one I just made up. So Jeff Richmond of the band Salty Dog. So very great guitar player, one that is fantastic, that played on the biggest hit that they ever had called Love in My Hand Grenade. That's what it was called. So my actual number 2 is Randy Rhoads of Ozzy Osbourne. So another situation where Ozzy always had great guitar players, and I just Randy Rhoads is another one that was just the real deal. Just what more can I say about Randy Rhoads that other people haven't said before? I mean, just changed the game at the time. He and Eddie Van Halen were compared to one another, and that's very very interesting because that those two were in the same league at that time. But I mean, those first two Ozzy albums, and then you had like Tribute, and then the other live that was called Ozzy Live. It came out later on down the road. All great stuff. Live, he was an amazing guitar player. In the studio, Diary of a Madman, the song itself is just a landmark song. Such a great work. Just the music itself is just such an amazing song. And I've always thought he was a great guitar player, and I mean, great soloist live. All over the place. Every chick was marked with him. Such a great guitar player. So, Steven, what is your next one if you've got one?
Okay, so yeah, it's a guy named Hunchback Long. So yeah, he played back in the day in '84. He was in our band, the Texas Brothers Marquee Band is what it's called back in that time period. And we were doing a lot of live shows in Las Vegas on that strip. And he became our bass player. And immediately the next day I moved him up to lead guitarist because we needed one, and also because a guy named Bill Ryder um, had just quit the band, and so yeah, I had to move him up. and he was like a shredder. He could play 60 notes per second. So he was like better than Steve Vai, and he could be fast. Him and Steve Vai got together one time, and like Steve Vai couldn't even play as fast as him. So, but the thing with him is Devin got pissed off at him a lot because he wouldn't play anything slow. And we had this one slow blues song called "Down on the River," and that Devin wrote, and he had a certain thing he had imagined of the way it was going to play out, and the guy never would play anything slow. So Devin fired him and brought in Steve Vai. But I just really liked the guitar player, and I mean, and also a guy named Don Landy. So bye.
Oh my! So my number one or my last bottom five. So Richie Blackmore. We've talked about him already. Great guitar player. There's more than just smoke on the water, like I said. Great. I mean, great guitar player. I mean, right off hand, I'll kind of name off some other ones that come to mind. Um, I've always thought Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits was a great guitar player, especially with the chicken picking style he did. Any guitarist that Molly Hatchet ever had was pretty great. Um, I'm trying to think of some other ones. George Lynch, Dokken, Lynch Mob, great guitar player there. One that doesn't get talked about as much, and I think he should. I think he had some great riffs there, and that's Mark McEntee of the Divinals. I thought he was a great guitar player. I know that. I know that band kind of falls under the radar for a lot of people, and I mean everybody knows that one song that was like a really big hit that everybody. I'm not even going to say what the name of it is, but everybody kind of knows it. But he was a great guitar player. And I mean, even that song, if you listen closely with a lot of the guitar stuff in that song, even that solo on that song, really great stuff there. So yeah, that's all. That's some of the guitar players. Maybe we could do another episode of this, or we could talk about a lot of other guitar players that we enjoy. Like for instance, Fred Durst when he did that solo that time, it was great. I thought that was amazing guitar solo. And Madonna when she did that guitar solo that time. We hope you all enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Like, comment, subscribe, give us some feedback, tell us what you think, and we will be back pretty soon with another episode. And I mean, you know the drill pretty much. So God bless you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay free, stay frosty, and just stay out there listening to the podcast. So thank you all so much and see you next time.